The Pentagon stayed silent for years while strange objects flew overhead, but now that silence is cracking. A Navy officer said a video of a near crash vanished from his email. A top scientist found space metal in the ocean and held it up in Congress. A defense expert said the U.S. has hidden wreckage since 1944. Brace yourself, a Pentagon insider just came forward with proof we're not alone. Metal in the sky. Silence below. The hearing began with quiet faces and stiff suits, but the tension in the room said something big was coming. They called it a briefing. Official, sure. Calm, maybe. But if you looked closer, really listened, you could feel the current shifting. A bipartisan congressional panel, military experts, scientists who weren't invited for decoration. This wasn't just another meeting. It was a crack in the ceiling, and through that crack, something alien might have been looking back, but one piece of metal would soon shake the room. Luis Elizondo stood near the front, his face calm but taut. The kind of calm you learn when you've seen things no one else believes. Years ago, he ran a secret Pentagon unitone they didn't want to talk about, until he made them. That day, he wasn't testifying. He was moderating. Like a man who already knew the ending but wanted everyone else to feel it unfold. Next to him was Avi Loeb, Harvard astrophysicist. Straight posture, sharp gaze, but even sharper questions. He had touched metals from the edge of the solar system, held pieces of something that didn't belong here. And now, he was here to say it out loud. The committee came alive quickly, not with anger, but with that sort of eerie anticipation, the kind you feel when thunder rumbles, and you're not sure if it's heading toward you or past you. Everyone was on edge, even if they didn't know why yet. Behind the table sat Mike Gold, former NASA official. He held something no one expected: photographs. Grainy, sure. Mysterious, definitely. Images pulled from deep inside NASA's vaults. One showed a perfect oval shape skimming above Mars. Another, a sharp white blur across the moon's surface. Another round, white, and cold as metal hung just above the Martian dust. Some called it the tic-tac, others called it proof. His voice cracked slightly as he asked what no one else dared. Why haven't we investigated this? Not years ago, not yesterday. Now, no answer came, just nod, nervous scribbles. A few glances darted across the room like sparks looking for fuel. Then came the numbers. That's how many UAP reports the military had filed in just a few recent years. Christopher Mellon dropped the number like a stone into water, and the ripples hit everyone. Mellon, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense. Seasoned intelligence, man didn't stutter. He didn't have to. Every one of those reports, he explained, had passed through AARO, the Pentagon's official group tasked with assessing threats from above. Not stars, not satellites, not aircraft, something else. The Pentagon had radar that could spot a baseball from across the country, satellites that could read a serial number off a car in orbit. But when it came to UAPs, the data was always missing, lost, misfiled. Or, worse than ever, recorded. The most powerful radar system in the world, the solid-state phased arrayhead, never logged a single report of a UFO. Not once in 20 years. Not even a whisper. For a machine designed to detect everything, that silence was deafening. Mellon raised his voice slightly. It wasn't anger. It was urgent. Either the system didn't work, or the truth was buried beneath layers of security thick enough to smother the stars. He called for the Inspector General. Not a polite request, a demand. The silence from the committee was no longer respectful. It was unsettled. Retired. Navy. Quiet. Until that moment. He spoke of an email classified, urgent and full of warnings. Attached was a video. UAP encounter. Close call. Navy jets. And the next day, the email was gone, erased from his system without a trace. Not spam, not a glitch, a vanishing. He hadn't gone public for fun. He did it because secrets like that weren't just dangerous, they were growing. He dropped another phrase no one was ready for: disinformation campaign. Not in Russia, not in science fiction. Here, from inside the intelligence community itself. A slow, deliberate effort to smother reports, mislabel sightings, and bury facts in bureaucracy. Meanwhile, the skies kept moving. In New Jersey, strange crafts hovered for hours silent, hovering, unclaimed. Both Trump and Biden were briefed. No one could explain it. Some called them drones. But drones don't dodge radar. They don't vanish without sound. And the sightings weren't slowing down, they were accelerating. That's when Loeb stepped in, not with stories or speculation, but with something colder, heavier, metal. Back in 2023, he pulled it from the floor of the Pacific. The fragments weren't ordinary. They weren't even from this solar system. The pieces had travel-dripped through space, slammed into Earth's ocean, and left behind something we couldn't explain. He'd analyzed them. Not once, not twice, multiple times. What they found didn't match any known metal on Earth. It wasn't rusted, it wasn't broken, it was structured, designed. He asked for funding, not just a few million, $1 billion to build detection systems, to scan skies, to map anomalies, to finally see what's really flying up there. The committee blinked. Some smiled nervously. But Loeb didn't flinch. He spoke like someone who already had proof, just wanted the tools to show the rest of us. 44% of Americans now believe the government is hiding information about UAPs. Another 28% say they aren't sure. The rest? Still hopeful? Maybe? Or afraid? Gen Z? Nearly half think the government knows more than it's saying. Millennials, too. Even baby boomers were starting to lean in. Republicans showed the most suspicion. Nearly half believed there was more under the hood. Democrats weren't far behind. Independents sat in the middle. But all the numbers pointed in the same direction. The public didn't trust the silence anymore. And just when it felt like the script couldn't twist any further, Dr. Eric Davis stepped forward, research physicist, military consultant, eyes tired, voice steady, ready to say what most in the room weren't prepared to hear. Since the 1950s, a secret program had been quietly recovering downed UFOs, not studying them, recovering them. And one case, he revealed, went all the way back to 1944. The technology, he said, was stored in places like Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Not on display, not cataloged, hidden, transferred, renamed every few years. So even if someone got close, the trail would vanish. And when they tested the pieces, the hearing shifted again. You could feel it in the way chairs stopped creaking, in the way people leaned forward without realizing. This wasn't about theories anymore. It was about shadows stepping into the light. Elizondo returned to the podium. He held up a photon verified, unfiltered, but undeniable taken by a civilian pilot who had captured a smooth orb slicing through the sky, the kind of object you never expect until it's already too close. He didn't pretend to know what it was, only that it was real, and no one knew where sightings like that were supposed to go anymore. FAA, NORAD, the Air Force. Everyone pointed fingers, but no one caught what was falling. Meanwhile, the Pentagon grew quieter, and beyond that room, across the country, across the world, the sky remained unchanged. Just when it seemed like things were done, a new voice stepped in with something even heavier. Erased files, unspoken truths. He wasn't a conspiracy theorist. He was the chief meteorologist of the United States Navy. He'd written manuals on flight safety. He'd planned missions. He didn't rattle easily. But when that memo disappeared, so did the illusion. The illusion that everything's under control. Gallaudet didn't mince words at the hearing. He stood before Congress, not as a man asking questions, but as a man holding a match to a fuse. That video wasn't science fiction. It was a safety issue. Pilots nearly collided with the unknown. Planes don't dodge mid-air threats for fun. He said it plainly. The disinformation campaign was real. Matthew Brown's name didn't appear in briefing packets. He wasn't scheduled to testify, but days before the hearing, his voice cracked open the silence again. A former national security official, Brown had already done something dangerous, written it down. That's what they called it. Not a novel, not a guess, a document, filed into the congressional record with a date stamp and a warning. Brown alleged that the executive branch of the United States had been running UAP programs in secret for decades, without oversight, without permission, without pause. He went public 2 days before the hearing, in a podcast interview that felt less like a broadcast and more like a confession. He looked tired. He sounded terrified. He didn't ask to be believed. He asked to be heard. In the back of the hearing room, his report sat printed in a manila folder on a congressman's desk. No one opened it during the briefing, but everyone knew it was there. And still, the sky didn't stop. There was metal in the Pacific, not rust, not garbage, something else, something that had dropped from space and refused to explain itself. In 2014, something fell from space. It crashed into the sea like a comet, but Loeb didn't buy the label. The object came in fast, too fast. And when it exploded, it left behind materials that didn't fit anything we'd cataloged. He wasn't just waving metal for drama. He had tested the pieces, run them through labs, pulled in chemists and physicists. What they found defied every terrestrial pattern. The structure wasn't random. It was engineered. And still, the government looked away. Loeb asked again not for attention, but for funds, cooperation, and time. He wasn't pleading. He was warned. If something had already arrived, and we chose to ignore it, that silence wouldn't last forever. And he wasn't the only one who felt it. Luis Elizondo leaned into the mic with the same steel-edge focus he'd carried inside the Pentagon a decade earlier. His words weren't emotional. They were deliberate. Cold, sharp, final. We are not alone in the cosmos. Not maybe. Not someday. Not if. The phrase didn't land like a theory. It hit the room like a dropped hammer. A conclusion. Elizondo had spent 10 years directing the Pentagon's UAP investigation program. Not the fake one, the real one. The one buried beneath a dozen acronyms and 3 layers of plausible deniability. And then he quit. Not out of boredom, out of frustration. The walls were too thick, the silence too loud. Every time he brought data forward, it got filed in a cabinet marked Other. Every photo, every video, every pilot's account pushed aside like it didn't matter. He looked the panel in the eye and said it again. The cover-up was not just a rumor. It was a strategy, designed, maintained, protected. At the same time, he held up a photo. The civilian pilot who took it was anonymous. Smart move. But the image was very real. A metallic disc, barely visible against the clouds. Not a smudge. Not a lens flare. A shape, defined, in motion. The room went still. Questions hovered, but none of them mattered because in the end, the strongest evidence wasn't in the photo he held up, but in the pattern behind it. 1,800 military reports, dozens of pilot testimonies, videos that survived deletion, metals that refused to melt, and stories always, the stories that somehow all lined up. Over the Pacific, over deserts, over missile silos, over oceans, over places no one was supposed to be watching. Even the FBI and CIA had looked into them quietly, carefully, for decades, and came up empty, or maybe came up full and just never told us. Some of the oldest reports went back to the 1960s. Pilots flying over New Mexico, watching discs spin beside them. Navy crewmen spotting objects without heat signatures or radar returns. Blips that weren't blips, objects that danced and then disappeared. AAROC, All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, was supposed to be the fix. A new division, clean slate, fresh start, but even they didn't have all the data. The most powerful radar systems in the world had gone silent. Either someone high up was burying the data, or the machines were never looking in the right places, and Mellon wasn't making accusations. He was drawing a line straight to the highest offices in government. As more stories came out, one question stayed: what if the silence can't hold any longer? The chain breaks. By the time the hearing ended, the room didn't empty, it exhaled. What began as a quiet briefing had turned into a fault line, the kind that doesn't just shake buildings but rewrites maps. Something had cracked open inside that Capitol chamber, and you could feel it like static in the air, like a signal waiting to be heard. But the sky didn't wait. It never had. Because the real story wasn't in the hearing. It was above it, across the Atlantic, the Pacific, the deserts, the forests, the oceans everywhere. Eyes looked up and saw what they weren't supposed to see. And the people watching weren't theorists anymore. They were physicists, admirals, and intelligence officers. Pilots with thousands of hours logged in jets that flew faster than sound. And still, they'd seen things that made them go quiet. Tim Gallaudet carried it when he said a classified memo had been wiped from his computer. Christopher Mellon carried it when he said the most advanced sensors on Earth had nothing to report. Avi Loeb carried it when he held out fragments from space, asking why no one wanted to know where they came from. And Luis Elizondo? He didn't just carry silence, he fought it. For him, the most haunting part wasn't the sightings. It was the system, the maze of missing files, the broken reporting chains, the pilots who didn't know who to call after seeing something impossible. Not because they were scared of aliens, but because they were scared of ridicule, of career damage, of being erased like that email. In a nation with more cameras than people, more satellites than schools, more drones than birds, how are we still pretending not to know? It was the pretending that stung. Because the closer they looked, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about what was up there. It was about what was being kept down here. Secrets can survive for a long time underground, but eventually something shifts. Pressure builds, files leak, people speak. And when the stories start to align, when the lies grow too large to hold, the truth starts to make noise. Just like on Oak Island, where old wood whispered of treasure, here, in this hearing, the whispers were of another kind of buried knowledge, not of riches, but of reality. Mike Gold's testimony stuck like a splinter. Those photos in the NASA archives weren't tabloid fluff. They were mission data, scientific logs, the kind of images you don't dismiss. And yet, for years, they had sat untouched, filed under unknowns, locked away from the scientists who might actually explain them. One of the photos showed a smooth, featureless object skimming low over the Martian plain. Not debris, not a shadow, something shaped, something aware. And still, no one asked the obvious questions. Why was this here? Who made it? And why were we pretending we didn't see it? Gold didn't need to raise his voice. He simply asked the room, the one question that echoed louder than any shout. Why are we not investigating this? There was no answer, just more silence. But outside that room, the world had already started to shift. Reports were piling up faster than they could be buried. Over the last 2 decades, nearly 2,000 military sightings had been filed, each one marked, logged, assessed, and then locked away. Air Force bases, Navy carriers, civilian skies, missile fields. Every branch, every coast, every level of Clearancino 1 was untouched. And still, nothing conclusive, no names, no sources, no explanation. Only shadows. And now, finally, a voice is rising to chase them. Inside, he laid out the claims that rattled the entire room. Multiple secret programs, operating without oversight, recovering materials from unidentified objects, hiding them in plain sight. No alien autopsies, no flying saucers in hangars, just wreckage, steel that didn't melt, alloys that bent physics, objects that crashed, Not from space, but from somewhere else. Brown didn't say what they were. He just said we didn't make them. It matched what Elizondo had hinted for years, that we had the pieces, but not the story. That scientists had examined the fragments and walked away saying, we couldn't make this ourselves. That phrase hung in the air like a storm cloud not made by us, not from here, not explainable. And yet, in its absence, it became clearer than any document, because what the Pentagon didn't say told the story best. Mellon called it out either the system didn't work or someone didn't want it to. And that's when the dots began to connect. The sightings weren't random. They were deliberate, directed, predictable. The radar wasn't broken, it was blindfolded. The government wasn't deaf, it was choosing silence. Every encounter, every memo, every classified clip pointed to one undeniable truth. This is happening, and someone doesn't want us to know. Back on the floor, Avi Loeb laid out his plans for a second expedition. More sensors, more samples, another deep-sea sweep near Papua New Guinea. He wasn't chasing ghosts. He was looking for proof that we weren't first. What if the real reason behind the silence wasn't fear of the unknown, but fear that we already know? Leave your thoughts in the comments, like and subscribe for more.